Relic by Ted Hughes appeared in his 1960 collection Lupercal. The poem concerns itself with the chance discovery of a sea creature's jawbone, bleached white and picked clean of all flesh, washed up on the beach, which sets off a train of thought leading the speaker to meditate on the nature of existence itself. There is no sentimentality or romanticising of nature in this poem, and the speaker concludes that it is, in the final analysis, extremely brutal. It's a dog-eat-dog, or in this case a fish-eat-fish world, in which there is fierce competition to survive and where life is programmed to do what it takes to achieve this, even if that means harming others. It is an unstoppable and self-cannibalising force. In the same way that the Ouroboros eats its own tail, the circle of life is such that creatures are born, live, die, and become sustenance for new creatures, who will in turn suffer the same fate, and so on, ad infinitum. The image of the jawbone as a cenotaph, an empty tomb erected in honour of a group of individuals who have fallen in war and whose remains lie elsewhere, is perhaps an allusion to the way in which humans are also subject to these same natural laws. The 17th century English philosopher Thomas Hobbes wrote in his book Leviathan, the title of which is the name of a mythological sea serpent, that the natural state of mankind is a war of every man against every man, and that the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. The First and Second World Wars were both in living memory when Hughes wrote this collection, while everyone at the time was living through the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension and brinkmanship between the United States and the Soviet Union, when the world teetered on the brink of annihilation due to the threat of the atomic bomb. The poem can then perhaps be seen as a memento mori, or a reminder of the inevitability of death. The poem comprises 3 stanzas of 5, 6, and 5 lines respectively. Although there is no established metrical or rhythmic structure, Hughes modulates the rhythm with frequent enjambment and caesura, which drives the poem forward only to pull it up sharply, so that it ebbs and flows a little like the tide that has washed the sea creature's jawbone up on the shore. There is no formal rhyme scheme as such, but Hughes does make some use of end rhyme, particularly in rhyming couplets at the ends of stanzas, such as single or masculine rhyme, e.g. cold and hold, and laugh and cenotaph, and half or slant rhyme, e.g. tossed and crust, and shells and skulls. Other sound patterning techniques, such as alliteration, e.g. claws, carapaces, and broken and breakers, which is also an example of polyptoton, and consonants, e.g. touches and clutching, give the poem a sense of cohesion. Other repetition techniques include the epizeuxis of gripped, gripped, and the polyptoton of the words jawbone and jaws, which feature 6 times throughout the poem. The jawbone is all that is left of the creature, and so Hughes creates a synecdoche, as he uses only these words even when referring to the creature when alive, to emphasise that the animal's instinct to relentlessly hunt to eat in order to survive is its primary characteristic. Hughes' diction is plain, which creates a matter-of-fact tone, although his syntax can often be quite convoluted, with long sentences containing other clauses nested within them that split the main clause in 2. E.g., there, crabs, dogfish, broken by the breakers or tossed to flap for half an hour and turned to a crust, continue the beginning. When the main clause is there, crabs, dogfish, continue the beginning. The one-word title, relic, refers to an object, particularly a fragment, surviving from an earlier time, which serves as a reminder. Fragments of bone, said to be those belonging to saints, and pieces of wood, said to belong to the cross upon which Jesus died, are known as relics and are venerated in the Catholic Church because the faithful believe that God acts through them. It is possible that Hughes used this title because his studying of the jawbone gives him in that moment access to a spiritual and existential truth The poem begins on a striking image. I found this jawbone at the sea's edge. Note how the line ends on a colon, which indicates that the speaker is going to expand and give further detail on what appears to be a chance discovery. He continues, there, crabs, dogfish, broken by the breakers or tossed to flap for half an hour and turned to a crust, continue the beginning. Here he describes how, on the beach at the waterline where it is roughest, the bodies of various dead sea creatures such as crabs, dogfish, become fragmented as they are washed up and tumbled around in the surf amongst the sand and pebbles. A breaker is a heavy sea wave that breaks into white foam on the shore, and the harsh alliteration and guttural consonants in the polyptonic broken by the breakers and the hissing sibilants of crust and tossed emphasise the sheer power of the tide. The phrase tossed to flap for half an hour suggests the almost careless way in which the movement of the water toys with the bone as each wave engulfs it. The image of the bone turning to a crust evokes the roughness and friability of its surface as the elements begin to erode it. These decaying remains, however, continue the beginning. In other words, in the grand scheme of things, the end of one creature's life is merely the beginning of another's, as its remains will provide sustenance to the next generation, and so a beginning is paradoxically merely a continuation. And what is the circle of life? Note how the enjambment present across these lines gives them momentum, as the reader is not permitted to pause, and evokes the relentless nature not only of the tide, but also of the forces to which we are all subject. The caesura in this line, which pulls the reader sharply up, highlights the phrase to underline its importance to the poem's central message. The speaker continues, the deeps are cold. The very depths of the ocean are inhospitable, not just in temperature, but in the very lack of mutual trust and friendship that can be found there. In that darkness, camaraderie does not hold. Note the perfect or full single rhyme of cold and hold here to emphasise the factual tone with which the speaker communicates the universal truth that it is every man, or fish, for himself. The verb hold, used metaphorically here to mean endure, is linked in the first line of the next stanza to the literal verbs touches and clutching to emphasise that any connection between the animals is purely physical, as they only grab onto them in order to eat, not embrace them. Nothing touches but clutching devours. The hushing sibilant consonants of the ch, present in touches and clutching, enhances the ominous abruptness of the way their prey is tightly seized and then eaten hungrily and quickly. The speaker continues, and the jaws, before they are satisfied or their stretched purpose slacken, go down jaws, go gnawn bare. Note Hughes's use of a synecdoche here. Even when speaking of the creature when alive, he continues to refer to it only by its jaws. By reducing its identity in this way, he suggests that it is an automaton, a killing machine that is programmed only to hunt, kill and eat, a need that is never fully satisfied until the day it dies when it is preyed upon itself. The phrase their stretched purpose evokes the way the jaws are always tautly wide open on the hunt for food, never slackening or loosening. There is quite intricate sound patterning in these complex lines. Note first the assonance of the or sound in jaws, before, jaws and gnawn, and the other open long vowels in there, go, and bear, which mimic the open mouth of the creature, as well as the hissing sibilants of satisfied, stretched and slacken, and the repetition of go along with the consonants of down and gnawn, to be found in the rhythmic go down jaws, go gnawn bare. Note the subtle movement away from the synecdoche at the start of this sentence, where jaws refers to the creature as a whole, to the literal jaws at the end of it. As gnawn bare of any flesh, they sink to the bottom of the ocean. And the jaws go down jaws. This transformation is clearer in the next lines as Hughes explains, "Jaws eat and are finished, and the jawbone comes to the beach." Note the polysyndeton in these lines, the simplicity of the multiple coordinating conjunctions evoking the inevitability and matter-of-factness of the process. This, he says, is the sea's achievement. An achievement is generally seen as a positive and successful outcome and suggests that the sea has an intrinsic and vital role to play in this circle of life, as it dumps the detritus of shells, vertebrae, claws, carapaces, skulls on the land where they erode until they will eventually return to the earth to become fine grains of sand. The asyndetic list here, punctuated by commas, mimics the way the bony remains of the sea creatures are littered over the shore, perhaps like gravestones in a graveyard. The third stanza begins, "Time in the sea eats its tail." In this image, Hughes casts time in the sea as an Ouroboros, an ancient symbol depicting a mythological serpent or dragon shown eating its own tail. Although this seems to be self-cannibalizing and grotesque, it is actually a symbol of unity, eternal cyclic renewal, the cycle of life, death and rebirth. And it would appear that this is how Hughes intends it to be interpreted, as the sea thrives or flourishes, discarding or belching up only those elements that are indigestible, the spars of purposes that failed far from the surface. A spar is a strong pole, such as the mast of a ship, and this metaphor evokes the creature's tough endo and exoskeletons that have underpinned and enabled their purposes to hunt, kill and eat until such a time that these failed far from the surface, causing the creature to die and sink like a shipwreck. None, he says, grow rich in the sea. While the sea as a whole may thrive, individual creatures live a life that is, in the words of Thomas Hobbes, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish and short, as their driving force is that of survival to the exclusion of anything else. Note how the sentence used to communicate this is also short and to the point. This curved jawbone, he says, returning to the very object that started this train of thought, did not laugh, but gripped, and is now a cenotaph. Although the bone may be curved like a smile, it didn't have the opportunity to laugh, so focused was it on survival. Instead, it gripped. Note the epizeuxis here, which emphasises its sole compulsion in life until it has become a cenotaph in death. An empty tomb which memorialises a group of individuals who have died as a result of war and whose remains are elsewhere. The way in which Hughes's speaker suggests the visual similarity between the bleached bone and an often tall white stone monument commemorating the dead suggests that he sees humankind as not being above the compulsion to cannibalise its own in a never-ending cycle of war. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.